Marhay na aga Bicolandia and good morning everyone. Welcome to Ateneo ICTC YouTube channel. I'm Iris and I'll be your host for this webinar. Before we start, don't forget to click the subscribe button and hit that notification bell for more webinar updates. So while we are waiting earlier before we go live, we have learned that some of you are from Camarines Sur, from Quezon Province, and also from Daat Camarines Norte. And we have also from Ateneo de Naga University employees. So we're glad to know that we have viewers even outside Bicol region. So wherever you are right now, we hope that this webinar would be helpful and beneficial to you in any way. So let's proceed with the following guidelines. Kindly observe proper etiquette in this webinar session. We encourage everyone to participate in the comment section. Only essential questions will be entertained during the Q&A portion due to the limited time. Other questions can be noted in the online evaluation form after the session. Online evaluation form after the session will only be open until 5 p.m. today, July 30, 2020. You will receive your e-certificate shortly after the evaluation. So, Ateneo de Naga University, through the College of Computer Studies, the Center in Information Technology Education, and the Information and Communications Technology Center, in partnership with the Ateneo Teachers Training Center, or ATTC, present to you our fourth webinar series entitled Student Portfolio as an Assessment Tool in a Flexible Online Environment. So our speaker for today, Dr. Arnulfo Reganit is the founding dean of the College of Education of Ateneo de Naga University, Naga City. During his watch for 20 years, the College of Education has been designated by the Commission on Higher Education as Center of Excellence and the Professional Regulation Commission as one of the top 10 high-performing teacher education institutions in the whole Philippines. Presently, he is the director of the Ateneo Teacher Training Center, or ATTC, and the regional program coordinator of the Private Education Assistance Committee, or PEAC, a trustee of Fund for Assistance to Private Education. He is a paper presenter in international conferences, as well as the recipient of numerous awards, citations, and distinctions. He is a fellow of the Philippine Educational Measurement and Evaluation Association. The Philippine Association for Teacher Education, or PAFTE, has bestowed upon him the PAFTE Parangal Award during its golden anniversary last October 22, 2018 at Novotel Hotel Cubao, Quezon City. In 2018, the Sangguniang Panlalawigan of Camarines Sur passed Board Resolution number 796, Series of 2018, commending Dr. Reganit as an exemplary educator that possesses professionalism and excellence in his field. The Sangguniang Panlalawigan highly recognized his wide contributions in the need of quality and excellent educators through the formation and continuing education of teachers in the province of Camarines Sur and in the entire Bicol region. Other awards he received are International Diploma, Honor in Education, ABI, Golden Achiever Award in Education, Professorial Chair Award, and Faculty Awards. He has published research in referred and indexed journals. Also, he is an author of many books in professional education courses which are widely used in the country. He is a sought-after speaker and lecturer in the region who can authoritatively expound on such topics classroom assessment, test, construction, curriculum design and evaluation, teaching strategies, classroom management, and teacher training and development. Dr. Reganit is locally and nationally recognized in teacher education development and training. Everyone, let us all welcome on screen Dr. Arnulfo Aaron R. Reganit.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes po.
Okay, good morning. So we will be together for 2 hours for this webinar on student portfolio as an assessment tool in a flexible learning environment. What prompted me to co-sponsor this webinar with ICTC is because of my conversation with our USEC last July 21 at 7:41 in the evening. I initiated our conversation with this message. Hi, USEC. I strongly recommend that in our classroom assessments, we emphasize more on process-oriented assessments than product-oriented. Both are performance-based assessments. The problem of product, it may be done by someone. Pen and paper may be assisted by parents as students answer the questions. Our dearly beloved USEC replied very shortly. Portfolios will be the main assessment instrument. We will discard periodical exams. Yes, process-oriented assessment will be part of the system for the school year 2020-2021. Thanks, Doc Popoy. God bless. Before we proceed with what is portfolio assessment, let us have a very quick review of what is assessment in the 21st century. Our assessment in the 21st century supports a balance of assessments, including high-quality standardized testing, along with effective formative and summative classroom assessments. These high-quality standards testing will still be there, but the problem of these high-quality standards testing is the results may be compromised. It's because our students are physically remote from us. Second, assessment in the 21st century emphasizes useful feedback and feedback on student performance that is embedded into everyday learning. Since our students are physically remote, since we changed the instructional modalities into online learning or modular approach, this feedback is very necessary for our students to improve their work. This is very important that we teachers promptly and clearly communicate our feedback so that our students may move to the next curriculum objectives. The third, our assessment in the 21st century requires a balance of technology-enhanced formative and summative assessments that measure student mastery of the 21st century skills. If there is such technology-mediated instruction, there is also what we call technology-mediated assessment. That is why this afternoon our webinar is the use of Google Forms as our assessment tool. Lastly, our assessment for the 21st century enables the development of portfolios of student works that demonstrate mastery of 21st century skills to teachers and prospective teachers. Sadly, among the different assessment methods, the most unexplored assessment method is portfolio assessments. We teachers are more into pen and paper or written tests and performance tests. Never have we tried portfolio assessments in our class. When our graduates in the teacher education apply at the Department of Education, what is required of them is a teaching portfolio. Likewise, graduates of business courses, when they apply in the industry, in the company, what is required from them now is not a resume, not only a letter of application, but what is also required of them is their portfolio. Before we define what is portfolio assessment, let us review what theorists say about what and how our students can learn. What do recent theories say about how our students learn and how should we assess their learning? We have Howard Gardner, the father of the multiple intelligences, and we have also Jean Piaget, and then Lev Vygotsky. Both of them are constructivists. According to Gardner, if we want to know what people are capable of doing, we need to look beyond the kinds of information we gain from pen and paper tests. The problem of pen and paper tests is that we put the non-linguistically able students at their disadvantage. Further, according to Howard Gardner, human potential encompasses verbal, linguistic, logical, mathematical, spatial, visual, musical, kinesthetic, interpersonal, intrapersonal, natural, and existential intelligence. And all of these multiple intelligences are addressed by portfolio assessment, but not by pen and paper. According to Piaget and Vygotsky, constructivist theorists, learning is a self-regulatory process of meaning making, meaning to say, our students are the one making their own learning out from their meaningful experience. It is a self-regulatory process of meaning making which suggests that teaching and assessment should be an opportunity for concrete, contextually meaningful experience through which our students can search for patterns, raise their own questions, construct their own models, concepts, and strategies. What is portfolio assessment? The first time I heard the word portfolio was when I was in elementary, and that was in 1970. Not because we were already into portfolio assessment. Remember, portfolio assessment was introduced in the early 80s. I heard the word portfolio it's because my father worked as an agent of an insurance. As an agent of an insurance, when he worked, he always brought portfolio. Or another word of portfolio is attache case. And what is in his portfolio are important documents of his clients. In the same manner, when we speak of portfolio, this contains important learning evidences of our students in our course. We have the first definition. And I love so much the first definition. It's because almost all the words need to be underscored. Portfolio assessment is purposeful, ongoing, dynamic, and collaborative process of gathering multiple indicators of learners' growth and development. It is purposeful because everything begins with a purpose. Why are we asking our students to work for an artifact? It's because there is a reason for that. Portfolio assessment always begins with setting goal. That is why it is purposeful. It is ongoing. It's because the students begin from planning and then they revise until they are able to perfect, until they are able to come up with the best artifacts. Dynamic, it's because instead the students simply memorize, explain, or understand, our students are the one making their own learning. Collaborative, it's because it requires interaction between teacher and students. And most importantly, portfolio assessment should be able to gather multiple evidences of students' learning. The word is multiple evidences of students' learning. If we allow our students to include in the portfolio all quiz papers and periodical examination papers, there may only be one indicator of students' learning. And therefore, what is in the portfolio should be able to demonstrate multiple, varied learning evidences of our students. Another definition of portfolio assessment, it is a collection of artifacts. The word is artifact because artifact is something that is extraordinary, something that is very interesting for us. and it has value for students and for us teachers. It is a collection of artifacts accompanied by a reflective narrative that not only helps learners to understand and extend learning, but most importantly, it invites the reader, including us teachers, to gain insights about how students learn and who our students are. Collection of artifacts accompanied by reflective narrative, because the heart of portfolio assessment is reflection. And when we read reflections of our students, then and only then we're able to understand how our students able to learn, and we are able to know better our students. A portfolio may include classwork, artistic pieces, photographs, and a variety of other media, all demonstrating the concepts that our students have mastered. When we require our students to write a reflection that correlates with a piece of work or that correlates with the artifacts, then this is a very commendable assessment practice. This practice is advantageous, commendable, because we allow our students to do self-assessments. They self-assess their works, and through this, they're able to set goals for improvement. Since our students are physically remote, then perhaps what we may require from our students is e-portfolio. Another word for this is digital portfolio or e-folio. An electronic portfolio is a purposeful collection of sample student work, demonstrations, and artifacts that showcase students' learning progression, achievements, and again, evidence of what students can do and what students have learned. The collection can include essays and papers, blogs, media, including recordings of demonstrations, interviews, presentations, and even graphics. If we will allow or if we will require our students to submit an e-folio, e-portfolio, digital portfolio, our students will be using applications or apps. So, when you download samples of e-portfolio, most of the e-portfolio are in YouTube. The students create their own YouTube account and they put all the artifacts in the YouTube. Another is it may be put in a Google Notebook or in a Google Docs or perhaps in other applications. So here are examples of digital portfolios submitted by students. Now, I want to correct the misconception of what is portfolio. What portfolio is not. A portfolio is not a placeholder for all. We don't allow the students to put anything in a portfolio. We don't allow our students to put everything in the portfolio, because a portfolio is not a placeholder for all or random student work. It is not a compilation of student works. And this is what I observed when students submit portfolios to their teachers. I remember when I accredited one private school, after we observed classes, we examined the documents, we visited the exhibits. The last part of the accreditation is faculty interview. And in the interview, since I am so much into assessment, I asked the teachers to tell me of their best practices in their assessment. And some teachers would say that they are already doing performance tasks. And one teacher proudly informed me that I am doing a portfolio assessment in my class. And further, she informed me that, have you not seen a sample of portfolio in the exhibits? But deep inside me, I wanted to tell her that what I have seen in the exhibits are only compilation of works, but these are not examples of portfolio. I want to correct that portfolio is not a placeholder for all. You don't include everything you have done or a random student work of our students. It is not a compilation of student works. To ensure that our portfolio process is educational, it is very important that we teachers must be mindful about which artifacts, which pieces of works need to be included in the portfolio, and we have to clarify what these portfolio, why these artifacts are included and for what purposes. Now, why is there a need for us to migrate into portfolio assessment? Why go into portfolio assessment? What is good of portfolio assessment is it tests what is really happening in the classroom. It offers multiple indicators of student progress. It gives the students responsibility of owning their own learning because we said the students are the one making their own learning, constructivist assessment. It offers opportunities for students to document reflections of their learning. It demonstrates what the students know in ways that encompass their personal learning styles and multiple intelligences. Portfolio assessment addresses multiple intelligences and varied learning styles of our students in our class. It affords us teachers new role in assessment process. It allows teachers to reflect on the effectiveness of instruction. It also provides teachers freedom of gaining insights into the student development or achievement over a period of time. What makes a good portfolio? A good portfolio always begins with clearly defined purpose and learning targets. That is why our definition of portfolio assessment, purposeful, ongoing, dynamic, collaborative process, because portfolio assessment always begins with clearly defined purpose and learning targets. Second, it is systematic and organized collection of student products. Not only the students collect products, but most importantly, portfolio assessment teaches our students to organize their products when we put these together into a portfolio. Then we have pre-established guidelines for what will be included. We have to inform our students before they begin working for their artifacts and portfolio. These what you call pre-established guidelines. One example of my pre-established guidelines when I ask my students to submit portfolio, one is I don't like that they put silver dust in any part of their artifacts, silver dust in any part of their portfolios. Another example of pre-established guidelines, I am very particular about submission of artifacts on time. It creates stress on my part when I'm checking artifacts 3 or 4, and yet there are students just submitting artifact 1. It creates stress on our part. Another example of pre-established guidelines, I do not like that the artifacts are scrolled and they even tie it with a ribbon because it takes time for me to open their artifacts, to read it, and then after reading the artifact, I have to scroll it again and I have to tie it with the ribbon. So we have to tell these guidelines to our students before they begin working for the artifacts and for the whole portfolio. Next, we allow the student to select some that they want to include in the portfolio. But the problem of allowing our student to select some of their pieces of works, what is selected is poorly done, poor works. My comments, my experience, when I allow my student to select any of these other works that we want to include in the portfolio, what we usually include are their pictures when they were in elementary, when they were in high school. Because they want to tell me that they were once a major leader. Okay? But these do not speak of learning. This is not an evidence of their learning. Another one is it allows our students to reflect and to evaluate. I mentioned earlier that the heart of assessment, portfolio assessment, is reflection. And in the process-oriented assessment, reflection, we use it as assessment. And then progress documented with specific products and or evaluations. We have a clear and appropriate criteria for evaluating student products or artifacts, and that is by means of rubrics. And we end the portfolio with conference. Okay? We call for a conference with our student to discuss the progress of their work. Then what are the advantages of using portfolio assessments now, especially that we are into flexible learning environments? We are into online learning or modular approach of teaching. One, what is good of portfolio assessment? It demonstrates learning over the course of time rather than what a student knows a particular day. In a pen and paper test, what the student demonstrates is only what they know for a particular day. But in the portfolio assessment, learning is demonstrated by them over the course of time. Second, it allows the students to reflect of their own learning, to self-assess, and to deeply understand the concepts, okay, instead of just a simple surface of explanation. And then, as I mentioned, it allows the students to interact with teachers. Okay, individual interaction between student and teacher, from planning until students are able to perfect, able to come up with best work. And then provide samples of student works which show growth over time. By reflecting on their own learning, that is self-assessment, students begin to identify the strengths and weaknesses in their works. These weaknesses then become improvement goals. There is also limitation, the fallback of portfolio assessment. We teachers, our complaint is always checking. Even in the pen and paper, the problem is checking. In the performance task, our problem, our complaint is checking. The same in the portfolio assessment, there's difficult for us to check a scoring difficulty, and the scoring difficulty may lead to low reliability. Low reliability. There is such what we call reliability error. Okay, the tendency of teachers to overrate the portfolio of a student because of the appearance of the portfolio, okay, the cover of the portfolio. Okay, the opposite of generosity error, okay, when the teacher overrates, okay, an artifact, a portfolio, that is generosity error. But the opposite of generosity error, that is severity error. Despite the students have done everything, they sacrifice their love life, family life, social life, just to be able to complete this portfolio, the grade is still very, very low. And that is severity error. Okay? The other one is central tendency error. The teacher plays at the center between 10 and 1. The score is perhaps between 6, 7, and 8. That is what you call central tendency error. Another disadvantage of portfolio assessment, since I mentioned earlier that portfolio assessment is unexplored, okay, among as many teachers, then there is a need for us to be trained on these, okay, portfolio assessment. Last, okay, this is not the last. Okay, we have still two disadvantages. This is very time consuming because before the student works, okay, before the student works for the artifacts, before the students, okay, put all the artifacts into the whole portfolio, then we have to give them a rubric. Rubrics should be given to them before the students commence, okay, working for their artifacts and for the whole portfolio. The last two, as I mentioned earlier, when we allow the student to select which materials, pieces of works we want to include in their portfolio, the selection is very poor, poorly selected. And the last, the sampling of student products. We cannot require the students to include artifacts in the portfolio that are too many. Ideally, the number of artifacts should only be 7. Artifact 1, Artifact 2, Artifact 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Perhaps you can even reduce the artifacts into 5 or 4, considering that our students are involved in many subjects, especially in the basic education. Okay, so the problem is sampling. Now, what are the principles of portfolio assessment? I wish to correct the impression that in the portfolio assessment, contents are jeopardized, contents are sacrificed, because the students are enjoying of what they are doing without giving much importance to the contents, to the lessons. And I wish to correct that, because in the portfolio assessment, we identify the most important subject matter, the subject matter that is important, or the subject matter of importance. And that is what we ask the students to work, okay, for an artifact. Okay, the subject matter, the content is demonstrated by our students through a skill or through a product. This is not content free. Portfolio assessment is never content free. Okay? In fact, we highlight, okay, the most important subject matter, okay, in the portfolio assessment. Therefore, at the beginning of the quarter, it is very important that we teachers should be able to identify what are the subject matter of importance in my course. What learning outcomes, learning competencies, which are very important, that I want the students to demonstrate this through a process or through a product, through a skill or through a product. Number 2 is learning principle. It enables our students to become active and thoughtful learners. Okay, in our definition, we said that portfolio assessment is dynamic, and our students are the one making their own learning, and we allow our students to reflect on their works. That is what we call learning principle. And the third is equity principle. It allows students to demonstrate learning styles and multiple intelligences. Unlike pen and paper, the pen and paper puts our non-linguistically able students at their disadvantage. But portfolio assessments, these caters to the different learning styles and to the different multiple intelligences of our students. What are the types of portfolio? So we have 3 pictures here. We have work portfolio. The other one is an exhibit. We have an exhibit. And then the third is we have what you call a documentary portfolio, or this is what you call assessment portfolio. Now, we begin with number 1, working portfolio. This is work in progress. Work in progress. I call these in my class unpolished works. These are your drafts. Give me your drafts. Give me your working paper. That is a working portfolio. A working portfolio is named because it is a project in the works containing work in progress. That is what we call working portfolio. Okay? So working portfolio. So working in progress, unpolished works, okay, unpolished artifacts. And these unpolished artifact needs to be revised, needs to be improved. That is working portfolio. And this is also known as the process portfolio. It's a process portfolio. Now, The second is what you call show or display portfolio or product portfolio. What you want to exhibit in the portfolio is the best works. Okay, the best work, a collection of student best works. Okay, what you want to exhibit, what you want to include in the portfolio is only the product, the final product. And the purpose of these, okay, product, okay, portfolio, display portfolio, show portfolio, is to demonstrate the highest level of achievement attained by our students. They want to show their best, okay, performance, the highest level of achievement, okay, attained by them in our course. Probably, the most rewarding use of student portfolio is the display of the students' best work, the work that makes them so proud. The pride and the sense of accomplishment that students feel make the effort well worthwhile and contribute in creating a culture of learning in our classroom. When we allow our students to demonstrate the best works, the highest level of achievement, then it contributes in the creation of the culture of learning in our class. And then the last we have assessment or documentary portfolio. In the documentary portfolio, we ask the students to include in the portfolio both the process and the products, the working portfolio and the product portfolio. In my class, when I ask my student to submit the final portfolio, the whole portfolio, my instructions is very clear. You should attach both the unpolished and the polished version. You have to include your draft and the revised work because it is very important for me to be able to look at the progress of my students before and now. That is documentary portfolio. The primary function of an assessment portfolio or documentary portfolio is to document what a student has learned. We want to see how students improve their work from the process portfolio, from the working portfolio, now into a display and put that in an assessment or documentary portfolio. The reflective comments will focus on the extent to which they believed the portfolio entries demonstrate their mastery of the curriculum objectives. Let us have one example. If the curriculum specifies persuasive, narrative, and descriptive writing, an assessment portfolio should include examples of each type of these writings, showing their working paper and their final paper. This is an example of documentary portfolio or assessment portfolio. The primary purpose of an assessment portfolio, documentary portfolio, is to document student learning on specific curriculum outcomes. As such, the items in the portfolio or the artifacts in the portfolio must be designed to elicit the knowledge and skills specified in the outcomes. Now, to align these different types of portfolio, with the purposes of assessment. So the purposes or the uses of assessment in the classroom, we have assessment as learning, assessment for learning, assessment of learning, and what is newly added is assessment to learning. Working portfolio or the work portfolio, the process portfolio is assessment as and assessment for learning. In the process portfolio, in the working portfolio, we allow our students to do self-assessment. We want them to be able to reflect the strengths and weaknesses in their artifacts. That is assessment as learning, self-assessment. But at the same time, the work and process portfolio is a formative assessment, assessment for learning. We call it assessment for learning. It's because we are assessing you for you to learn. Assessment for you to learn. That is why assessment for learning. Assessment as learning is assessment for you to do self-assessment. So that is work or process portfolio. Assessment as learning and assessment for learning is not graded. We don't grade the artifacts that is in the works or in the process portfolio because it's very clear that assessment as assessment for learning, both of them are formative assessments and formative assessment is non-graded. Then we proceed to the second type of portfolio, show or display portfolio. This is assessment of learning. I am assessing of what you learned. What you included in the whole portfolio is your best products. And this is what you want me to rate you. Assessment of learning. And the third is documentary portfolio, assessment portfolio. This is also assessment of learning. And so, which of these types of portfolio are not graded and which are graded? Working portfolio, process portfolio, not graded. Show portfolio, display portfolio, product portfolio, graded, and documentary portfolio, assessment portfolio, graded too. Now, how do we plan assessments using portfolio? We always begin with planning, and our planning includes the identification of learning targets and uses. Because we said that portfolio assessment begins with clearly defined purposes and learning targets. What do I want to include in the artifacts, in the portfolio of my students? Knowledge learning target, reasoning learning target, product learning target, skill learning target, or affect learning target. Physical structures. So we have to tell the students, will I ask my student to submit a portfolio in a scrapbook? So how do you like the portfolio, the artifacts they look like? Next, sources of content, guidelines for self-reflection, and scoring criteria. Then after planning, we now proceed to implementing. When we implement portfolio assessment, it includes we have to review the scoring criteria, the rubrics with our students. Our rubric we developed is only tentative. We have to present our rubric to our students. And the students' comments, and if you think the comments are valid, then we have to adjust our rubrics. One example of which, when I presented my rubric, my students would say, "Sir, can we decrease the percentage allocated to creativity? Because creativity is gender biased. Girls are more creative than boys." And since I find it as valid, and therefore I adjusted my rubric. Supplying content, student self-evaluations, teacher evaluations, and student-teacher conferences. How will you conduct this teacher-student conferences? Students should be meaningfully involved in the selection of work samples. And then the samples should only be enough. Should only be enough. I mentioned earlier that in one semester, what I only require the student is 7 artifacts. That is an ideal number of artifacts in our portfolio. When we require our students too many artifacts to be done, that is too difficult for them to work on, but difficult also for us in the scoring. What is very important is that just enough, as long as these enough samples are able to meet the purposes of our portfolio. And never forget to remind our students there should always be a table of contents in the portfolio. We have also to teach our students on how to do self-evaluation and self-reflection. And then lastly, our teacher, we evaluate the portfolio, the artifacts through a checklist. We now proceed to the process for selecting and using portfolio. First, we ask ourselves, what is the purpose of the portfolio? Why am I asking my students to submit a portfolio in my course? And after we clarify the purpose of portfolio, then the next question we ask, what type of portfolio will I ask my students to work on, to submit? And lastly, what are the considerations when I ask my students to work on this kind of portfolio? So these are the processes that we have to observe in the selection and the use of portfolio. Now, the purpose of portfolio. Why are we asking the student to submit a portfolio? Is it because we want to introduce the concept of portfolio in our class? Or perhaps we want to introduce to our learners to reflect on their learning. Since our students have not developed the habit of reflection, then why not try portfolio assessment in the class? Or perhaps you want to inform next steps for instruction, or you want to involve learners for self-assessment, or perhaps the purpose of asking the students to work on portfolio, you want to determine their readiness for the next steps or for the next levels. And after we're able to answer those questions, then we select what type of portfolio will I ask my students. Working portfolio or process portfolio, display or showcase portfolio or product portfolio, assessment or documentary portfolio. What are the considerations when using this type of portfolio? What is the form and what's the format of the portfolio? How can I best involve my students? Which learning outcomes will be addressed by the portfolio? What support will my learners need? How prescriptive the portfolio will be? Are the artifacts, what artifacts will be included in the portfolio? What are the expected learning outcomes, learning targets? How will I gather evidence of learners' ability to achieve the learning outcomes? We now proceed to the process of portfolio. Without observing this process, then we cannot conclude that what we ask from the students, what the students have submitted to us is not a portfolio, but only a compilation of words. May I remind, without observing this process, then what the students or what we ask from our student is not a portfolio, or we are not into the portfolio assessment, because what the students submit is only a compilation of words. Portfolio assessment begins with setting goals. So the student should be able to identify, why are they doing this artifact? Why am I making this piece of work? We have to make it aware to it. Make them aware. They have to reflect. They have to think, why am I making this work? So we have to set the goal. And after setting the goal, we have to collect evidences of their learning. We have to collect. Not all collected learning evidences, or not all collected artifacts, not all collected pieces of works, they are selected. And after they select, then we organized. And after they organize these artifacts, these products, they reflect on it. Because we said that the heart of portfolio assessment is reflection. And this is very Ignatian. And then we evaluate. The teacher evaluates now. Or we even allow self-assessment. We allow our students to do self-assessments on their own works. Or we can even allow peer evaluation of the portfolio of our students. And then the last, we have conferral or we have exhibits. Sad to say that our students work so hard for the portfolio. And after we check the portfolio, we put these portfolios just sometimes at the corner, or worse, at the trash can. So very important that these portfolios need to be exhibited, should be exhibited. I would even suggest that when we call for a PTA meeting, while others are waiting for other parents to come for a PTA meeting, it is a very good practice that Okay, we exhibit the portfolios of our students, and then we ask the parents, while waiting for others to come, would you like to look at the work, the portfolios of your children? There is conferral, and there is what you call exhibit. In the compilation of works, these processes are never observed. And so we cannot consider it as portfolio assessments, but only a compilation of works. Now, let me give you one example. We set the goals, then we collect. Like for instance, when we go somewhere, like for instance, we go to Baguio for an educational tour, okay, a group of teachers or a group of students, okay, for an educational tour. From Naga or from the original place to the destination, our students take a lot of pictures. They take a lot of pictures. And then when they go home, they can notice that in their cell phones, in their cameras, in their iPads, there are already 350 pictures in different places they have visited. Other than the 350 pictures, there are pictures that were shared or tagged by their friends. So from 350, the pictures are now 500 pictures. Will you include all of them in the photo album? Will you include all of them? Will you include all of them when you post pictures in your Facebook timeline? So you will only select among all of these pictures, which will you include, okay, in your photo album. So you select. And after you selected, you organize. How would you organize the pictures in the photo album? Perhaps our students will organize the pictures according to the places we have visited. Or perhaps day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. Okay, so that is how our students do. They collect learning evidences. They collect pieces of works, their works, but not all of them will be included, will be selected, because we said we have to be mindful, okay, of what will be included in the portfolio. Okay, and then after we select, we'll teach them to organize. We'll teach them to organize. A very poor organization of portfolio. This is what I do not like when students organize their artifacts in the portfolio. They will present to me all the artifacts, artifact 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And after artifact 7, they have one piece of paper or two pieces of paper, and they put all their goals, goal 1, goal 2, goal 3. This is the goal for artifact 1, this is the goal for artifact 2, and then another pieces of papers, and they write all the reflections for artifact 1 until artifact 7. The best organization is that they begin with a goal, and then they present the artifact, and then they end with reflection. Well-organized artifacts. Well-organized artifact. The end with reflection. Now, let us have samples of these processes. Number 1, goal setting. These are sample questions or sample sentence prompts for students to be able to write their goal for certain artifacts. What I target to accomplish are, I am doing this work because I want to accomplish. Especially for the elementary, okay, in grade school, okay, in the goal setting, we can even provide them a sentence prompt. And what they will do is to complete the sentence prompt. We have here a sample. This is the work of my students submitted in previous years. This is artifact 6. And I asked my students to develop a survey tool, because a survey tool assesses the affective traits of our students. So we have here the goal. And his goal, when he worked for artifact number 6, which is a survey tool na nakagagawa ng survey questionnaire na magpapakita ng opsyon, pag-uugali, opinion o interes ng mga mag-aaral sa isang paksa. So that is the goal. Another one. Okay, so this is the last artifact I asked my student to submit. Instead of asking them, Could you please give me a summary of what we discussed in assessment class, assessment 2? So instead, I asked them to come up with a brochure. Okay, so what are you going to include in the brochure? Okay, and I want them to include the important topics we discussed in our class. And the goal of my student working for artifact number 7 na kagagawa ng brochure tungkol sa kabuuang summary, kabuuang paksa ng assessment 2. Then we have another example. This is the artifact itself. This is the goal, okay, for artifact 7, and this is the artifact itself. Okay, so it's not always pen and paper. This is even graphic, very, very creative, very good work of my student. And then we have here another goal, and the goal is to observe the behaviors of the students assigned to me. Okay, because I asked them to observe. Okay, the purpose of this artifact is to be able to come up with an observation report. So I give them a student to be observed, and without informing anyone in the class who is assigned to her or assigned to him. So the goal, okay, she begins with the goal to observe the behavior of the student assigned to me. And then, if you look at it, below is the artifact itself. He used a checklist when he observed the student assigned to her. And then we have another one, okay, to create a transcript of interview. Okay, if you look at the sample artifacts are varied, and these are multiple indicators of students' learning. This one is, I asked them to interview a teacher, and the artifact is a transcript of interview. To create a transcript of interview, to know whether the teacher uses traditional or new ways of assessing students. So this is a transcript of interview. Okay. The last key artifact, artifact number 7, is brochure making. That is a different learning, okay, evidence of our student. Now, so we are done with second goal. The next after second goal is we collect. Shall we collect everything? Or shall we collect the whole program, just a unit, or just a quarter? Okay, so shall student collect everything, or just a whole program, just for a quarter, first quarter, or perhaps just a part of the quarter, okay, a unit, or the whole semester? So after the student is able to collect these learning evidences, work pieces, artifacts, now they select. Will they select only few things? Or the artifacts selected by a teacher, selected by themselves, selected by their peer, or perhaps we allow their parents, to select which artifacts they want to include in their portfolio. In my case, most of the artifacts are selected by me. Artifact 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, I select what will be included in the portfolio. But I allow them, other than artifact 7, include anything that you want to demonstrate. You want to show to me your best works. Then, here are sample entries in a portfolio. Creative cover and explanation. I always ask my students to give a title, to give a name, of their portfolio. And when I open their portfolio at the back page of the cover, I always ask them, explain the concept of your portfolio about the cover. About the cover. Now, just looking at the concept of the portfolio, you will understand our students. Just looking at, because we said that what is good of portfolio assessment is that it allows us to understand how students learn and who our students are in our class. One example of which, one of my students submitted a portfolio, and then when I open every artifact, the artifact is always put the background of the artifact is a musical instrument. Artifact number 1 is a piano, artifact number 2 is a guitar, just to find out that he is musically inclined. So creative and its explanation. And the explanation is found at the back of the cover. And I ask my students, could you please give a title of your portfolio? Like, for instance, Colors of the Wind, Transcend, Another is layo, fly. So these are examples of titles of their portfolio, and then I ask them to explain. Next, as I mentioned, never forget to remind the students to include table of contents, statement of goals, expectations. Then the artifacts can be done by them, solo, individual, or some of the artifacts are done by group. There are artifacts that are done inside the classroom, or these artifacts are done outside, from the classroom. Then composition, then of course, written reflections are very important. Next, the evaluation instruments, our rubrics may be attached by them. Then letters, or these are what we call testimonials. They ask their former teachers to comment on their works. They ask their parents to comment on their works. And then autobiography about the author. When I read about the author, it helps me understand my students better about the author. Now, the autobiography may be presented as the first page, or it can even be at the last page. So I have here samples of these sample entries in a portfolio tungkol sa pabalat, about the cover, tungkol sa pabalat, tungkol sa pabalat cover. It's about the cover. Another example, cover design. And this is the explanation of the cover design. And the title of the portfolio is Transcend. This one, the cover, the title of the portfolio is Layo. That's a Bicol term, which means fly. Soar high. And then we have here tungkol sa manunulat, about the author. Then we proceed to organizers. So we are done with setting goals. I've given you examples on how we teach our students to set their goals. Then the students collect. Then the students select. Am I correct? They select. And these are sample entries in the portfolio. We now come to organize. The organizers. Now, the artifacts can be organized with the use of the following envelopes. In our office, the files of our students are organized by envelopes. Individual student has an individual envelopes, or individual student has an individual folder. So envelopes. Second is a clear book. This is the usual, the common organizer of my students. They create their own clear book. And the clear book is made of these illustration boards. Next, colored magazines. Colored magazines. But I don't like my student to use books as their organizer. They paste the artifacts in some pages of the books. I don't like that. Next, the common organizer of boys and gentlemen in my class is a shoebox. Because boys are less creative. So box lagi yon. They just simply wraps the box and they put the artifacts there in the box. And common for girls is always a bag with all the flowers in the bag. And then we have photo album or album, and then we have a cabinet made by them. But I wish to inform you, I don't like that the organizers of my students are those that are commercialized. These are available, easily available at bookshop, at bookstore. Like for instance, we have at Master Square, bookstore, and this is the organizer, new folder organizer. Now, if you see it when you open it, there are a lot of plastic papers, plastic cellophanes, and what the students will do is only to insert. You will just simply insert because if we allow that, we are not teaching our students to become creative in their portfolio. Portfolios, because it allows our students to be more creative. So these are samples of organizers. Setting goals, we collect, we select, we now teach our students to organize. I will show you samples of organizers of my students. So we have this one, Layo. Layo. This is done by a Filipino major student of mine, Layo. So it's a box, but this one is with an owl because he knows that I am an owl collector. And then he even taught me how to open it so that the wings of the owl will open very widely. Now another, we have this one. Of course, this is done by a girl with a lot of flowers. a lot of flowers. So it's also within the box, but within the box there is this what you call uh, a folder, a folder, and this folder is made by them, an album, I mean, an album, and this is made of illustration boards. Next, we have this one, transcend, transcend. This is their organizer, and then another one is a treasure, box, So these are samples of organizer, and within the organizers, what you see are artifacts. Okay, now we now proceed to reflect. Set goals, collect, select, reflect. Again and again, the heart of portfolio assessment is reflection. It is even better that we ask the students to write reflective narratives. Because when we read reflective narrative, then we're able to know, we're able to gain insights from them as to what we have learned from doing this artifact. So these are the ways to reflect. In the primary grade, simply we say, my best work, my worst work, or they put stickers of a happy face or a sad face. And of course, in the intermediates, high school and in college, what we require from them is a narrative reflection or reflective narrative. This is what I ask from them. Writing diaries, journals, or labs. Okay? So these are examples of reflections of my students. Again, since the checking, reading, scoring is difficult for us, so we have to specify some limitations on how they write reflections. I tell them that I don't like long reflections. So just enough. Don't make too long for us to read. So look at this artifact number 2. After doing a proposition on a certain issue using Ennis model, our topic here is critical thinking. So the purpose of working for this artifact is I want them to develop their critical thinking using Ennis model, and also I want them to assess how critical we are in making a decision. So artifact 2, after doing a proposition on certain issue using Ennis model, I have realized that before making a decision, it is very important to weigh the effect of the decision to yourself and to other people. This artifact is very helpful to everyone in making decisions. Next, another reflection. In assessing students, not all the time the teacher uses traditional way of conducting an assessment. Sometimes the teacher uses new way of assessing the learners to give them a chance to supply the knowledge and skills that they have acquired. As a future teacher, to have best performance from the learners, we must provide them both the two ways of assessing students, that is, pen and paper and performance tests. Through that, they can give their best to perform and excel in class. So another reflection, and then we have your pagmimilay. This is in Filipino. Okay. And then we have sample questions for reflection. So to guide our students for reflections, so we may use these sample questions. What did you learn from writing this piece? From working for this artifact? What would you have done differently if you had more time? What are your greatest strengths and weaknesses in these artifacts? What would you do differently if you did this over and over again? What problems or obstacles did you experience when doing this artifact? Is this your best work? If yes, why? If not, why? What will you do for your next words? Which sample would you say most satisfying for you and why? How did you go about completing this artifact? How did you respond to suggestions for improving work samples? Now, we said that we have to be careful about what to be included in a portfolio. And we said that the characteristics of portfolio assessment, it always begins with clearly defined purpose and learning targets. As much as possible, our portfolio includes knowledge, learning targets. When I ask my students to interview teachers, because I want them to know if teachers are already using the new trends in classroom assessment, that is more of knowledge learning target. I want you to know, I want you to find out if most teachers in the fields are using the old assessment practices or are they now into the new trends of classroom assessment, that is knowledge learning targets. But the second artifact I ask them to do is reasoning. When I ask them to make a decision, a possession paper, when I ask them to decide on certain issues, that is reasoning. But the third artifact I ask them to do is skill. I ask them to develop a rubric, holistic and analytic rubric, that is skill. And then we have product. I even ask them to come up with a brochure. If you notice, okay, the artifacts included in the portfolio are varied, okay, and they are able to address the portfolio, the artifacts, able to address different learning targets. Now, how do okay, assess, how do we grade the whole portfolio? In the portfolio assessment, our assessment tool is a rubric. So this is what I use when I score the whole portfolio of my student. There is a separate rubric in every artifact, but there is also a separate rubric for the whole portfolio. When my students put all together artifacts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, okay, that is the whole portfolio. Now, for me, okay, on the first column are criteria, but technically we use the term dimensions. These are the essential qualities I am looking at the portfolio of my students. Number one is promptness in the submission of portfolio. Number two is the quality of the container. Under quality, okay, the container or the organizer must be portable, durable, and flexible. Next, quality of the cover. It should be attractive, with unique concepts, with the explanation of the concept neatly done, presents important information like the name of the portfolio, the honor, the course title, etc. And then we have the organization of the entries, how the products, how the artifacts are organized by the students. Next, creativity in the layout of entries, resourcefulness, because I encourage my students to use recycled materials. I don't like my students that the portfolio is made of commercialized materials. When we allow our students to use recycled materials, then we teach our students to be more creative. Neatness of works, and lastly, relevance of the entries in the course. So these are what I am looking at. These are the essential qualities I am looking at in the whole portfolio of my students. So these are dimensions. They are found on the first column. On top, we have scaling, and the scale is a combination of numerical and interpretative. We have excellent, very good, good, poor. Okay. Next, below, the excellent, very good, good part, or poor, across these dimensions, we call them as criteria. These are descriptors. What makes an excellent creativity? What makes an excellent organizer? Okay, so this is what you call descriptor, and the descriptors are what you call criteria. Now, in the criteria, we will be using language. The language will differentiate the level of performance. Like, for instance, the common language that is used, always, sometimes, oftentimes, seldom, and never. Okay, all, and then the opposite is none at all. So these are examples of language. Language can even be, like for instance, beginning, developing, intermediate, proficient, excellent. So these are example of a language. We use language as we describe the performance of our students in the different dimensions. So we need an evaluation tools, and that is what you call rubrics. So, it can be an alternative response, like for instance, acceptable, not acceptable, poor, good, alternative response, rating scale. In our rubric, in most cases, we use a rating scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 3, 2, 1, and another one is a checklist. So these are what you are looking at in the artifacts, are these observed in the artifacts. Now, My dear beloved teachers, the role of rubrics in the portfolio assessment. Rubrics are scoring scale used to assess students' performance along a task-specific set of criteria. Rubrics contain the essential criteria for the task and appropriate level of performance and typically created to measure students' performance. Usually, a rubric includes dimensions. These are essential qualities of an exemplary performance. Then we have the scales. The scales it can be numerical, interpretative, or you combine both. You have excellent. Okay, and excellent is equivalent for 5. And then we have criteria. Okay, a rubric is usually a package of the three dimensions. The first thing that we have to look at is dimension. What qualities I am looking at an exemplary performance. Then the next, we decide for the scale that we will use, and then we write for that criteria. So we have here sample. The components are put together in a rubric. So on the first column, that is dimension. On top, we have scales, and then that arrow pointing down, these are what you call criteria. These are descriptors. So we have dimensions, we have the scales, and we have criteria. Okay, so the two main types of rubrics, we have holistic and the other one is analytic. If you want to assess specific weaknesses, detailed assessment, and feedback, then I would suggest that you use analytic rubric. Now, if you want a general comment, general assessment in the work of student, then we use the holistic rubric. Provides comprehensive description of each level of performance, useful for quick and general assessments and feedbacks. Descriptions may be organized in column or rows. On the other hand, analytic rubric, we break down or we break out criteria for distinguishing between levels of performance on each criteria. And this is very useful for detailed assessments and feedback. Descriptions, the analytic rubric is usually organized in a matrix. So this is an example of analytic rubric, and this is an example of a holistic rubric. We put all together the criteria in one scale. That is a holistic rubric. But there is something that is new. We have this what you call anaholistic. Anaholistic, it can be that it's a holistic rubric, but there is one or two dimensions that we want it to be too detailed. Too detailed. So that is an example of anaholistic. Okay, so these are examples of, if you look at this, outstanding, you put all together, outstanding, and these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are dimensions, variety of work, resources, organization, evidences, etc. You put all together into one, and this makes outstanding. Okay, so we have 4, and then we have 3, and then we have 2, and then we have 1. Okay, so sample analytic. So, as I mentioned earlier, an analytic scoring rubric is presented in a matrix. Okay, so we have here excellent. Practicality in the choice of container. Handy, durable, flexible, cost effective. Okay, now if it is excellent, it should satisfy all of this. Okay, so if it is satisfactory, very satisfactory, it only satisfies 3 out of these 4. If it is satisfactory, it satisfies only 2 out of 4. And if it needs improvement, then it only satisfies 1 or none of all. Okay, so we have here a project plan. Excellent. Because they satisfy all, presents complete information, submits, on time well, and the other one is well prepared. Satisfactory, very satisfactory, only 2, then satisfactory, only 1, and needs improvement, none at all. Picture, showing how one implemented the plan. Okay, so I will give you some reminders. Criteria or evidences should be identified by the possible evaluators. Not only teachers identify criteria in the rubric development. It's better that we also consult our students. Okay, we can even ask the student, which of these projects submitted last year you consider as the best? And if the students consider this project as the best, then you ask, what makes this project the best? And then you are able to come up with these criteria or dimensions, essential qualities that make the project exemplary. Take note that this criteria should be known before the students start developing their portfolio. Evidences should vary in weight depending on the degree of importance. That is why for me, creativity always has the lowest percentage allocation. I cannot give 25% for creativity because creativity, as I mentioned, is gender biased. Next, possible criteria in scoring rubrics for a portfolio. We have here completeness. Okay, sometimes the container, the organizer is very impressive, but when you open the organizer, the container, what is only in the container is only 2 artifacts. Yet you require them of 7. So it's not complete, but the appearance, the organizer, is very appealing to us. But if you look at the entries, the artifacts, there are many artifacts that are missing. Next, we have creativity, originality, resourcefulness, reflectiveness. I want reflectiveness, the depth in the reflection, organization, on how the artifacts, the products are organized, mechanics, visual appeal, accuracy of information, diversity of collections, because we said portfolio assessment gathers multiple evidences of learning. Next, multiple intelligences, quality of product, evidence of understanding. Now, we have here good practices in portfolio assessment. The portfolio rubric is presented to the learners before they start. I mentioned this already. Learners participate in the refinements of the scoring rubric. Next, the last part of portfolio assessment process is conferral exhibits. So in the exhibit of the portfolio, it can be student and teacher, students' parents, or we may even involve the three, the students, the teachers, and the parents. So we should always have this what you call conferral. Conferral. So this is the end of the portfolio assessment process. So we are able to cover the entire process of portfolio. Let me review them. One is setting goals. I've given you a lot samples of how students are able to set their goals. Next, decollect. Will decollect everything, or they will only collect for certain unit, for certain quarter. Next, after decollect, deselect. And then after deselect, deorganize. I've given you samples of how students are able to organize their artifacts. Then after they organize, they reflect. I've given you sample questions on how students reflect. And I also give you samples of reflections of my students and their artifacts. And then after the reflection, now we have this what we call evaluation. I presented to you rubrics on how I assess, how I evaluate the works of my student. There is a rubric for the individual artifacts, but there is another rubric for the entire portfolio. And the last step of the process of portfolio making is conferral or exhibits. In conclusion, portfolio assessments are quickly becoming an important technique for both students and instruction. At the end, what gets assessed is what gets learned. As we adjust our instructional modalities, it is imperative that assessment should also adjust. By doing so, we make our classroom assessment matter. Thank you so much for listening. So I wish to acknowledge my references of my PowerPoint presentation. We have Marlene Balagtas, the President of Philippine Educational Measurement and Evaluation Association, connected at Philippine Normal University. We have Dr. Gonzalez, the founding president of Primeria. We have Dr. Carlo Magno, the past president of Primeria. And then Macmillan, his book, Classroom Assessment Principles and Practice for Effective Standards-Based Instruction. And I also used my book, and published in 2012 Assessment of Learning published by CNP Publishing House. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Doc Popoy, for the very informative discussion you've shared with us this morning. And I believe our viewers have something to ask you. But before that, we'll be having a short break. So you can, we will have a short break. You can use this time to comment down your questions while Doc Popoy takes his time to prepare for the Q&A portion. We will entertain some interesting questions that needs clarification later. So please don't leave yet. We will be back in few minutes. So we're back. We will now have our Q&A portion with Doc Popoy. So Doc Popoy, our first question is from Sir Adrian Remodo. His question is, in college setup, will it be good assessment portfolio if we teachers identify questions to be answered, reflection or action papers into one and make it, say for example, a prelims
Okay,
exam?
yes. Okay, our prelims can be in a form of portfolio assessment. Wait. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, Doc
Okay, okay,
Popoy.
sige,
I
sige.
can hear you po.
In fact, a portfolio assessment is very ideal to students in college. Now, provided that the questions that we ask to our students should go beyond from applying, the questions that we ask they should be process-oriented. Now, in this case, reflections, questions identified by teacher, these are examples of teacher-selected artifacts. Teacher-selected artifacts. So the teacher is the one identifying the questions to be answered by our students. Okay, the teacher is the one identifying reflection reaction papers. But see to it that for prelims, if this will be our prelims, remember our definition of portfolio assessment. It should gather multiple indicators of students' learning. So it should only be one, but several. Several. And I suggest that we adopt the documentary assessment rather than the product assessment. Okay, the product assessment. So this is highly encouraged for those who are teaching in college. The questions may come from us, the reflections, reactions we ask from them, selected by us. Okay, but see to it that the questions elicit many possible answers. And besides, if this will be our prelims as portfolio, okay, the portfolio should be able to gather multiple indicators of students' learning, not only one, but several. Uh, now, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, what is good at portfolio assessment is that it caters to the multiple intelligence of our students. Regardless of the different levels of learning, the students can work for the portfolio. Okay, can work for the portfolio. Okay. In fact, my experience, I've been into portfolio assessment for many, many years, more than 15 years. Okay, my students in the previous semesters are not performing well because in the first semester it's more of pen and paper. However, when they are in my class portfolio assessments, and when I ask them to do portfolio artifacts, I notice that there's a big difference in their performance because this portfolio assessment able to cater to the different learning styles, different multiple intelligences. So regardless if the students have different levels of learning, this can be addressed by portfolio assessments.
Thank you, Doc Popoy, for answering that question. So we have question from Sir Ramon Almoneda. His question is, I deem the submission of student portfolio which are assessed with the proper rubrics can stand very well in place of online exams which are almost impossible to cheat free. Does this make sense?
Uh, could you please flash again? Okay, so I think that the submission of student portfolio which are assessed with the proper rubrics can stand very well in place of online exam. Okay, okay, so now, to avoid cheating in the portfolio assessment, it's better that we ask the student to submit both the unpolished and the polished. We want to see how students are able to progress. The problem if we only ask the students to submit the product portfolio, the products can be faked, the products can be cheated. That is why what I adapt in my class, I always ask my student that when you submit your artifacts in the whole portfolio, would you please include both the unpolished and the polished? Because I want to see how you improved from the working portfolio to the documentary portfolio. Okay? By this, we are able to avoid cheating. Yun ang problema kasi sa product, the product can be done by anyone. But if we adopt this, what you call documentary portfolio, then we are able to compare with the work of our students before and now.
Thank you, Doc Popoy. Our next question is from Mom Blessing Nesho. Her question is, I just would like to ask from Dr. Reganit if he can give us some ideas on how to do the portfolio assessment in math subjects since we are dealing more on solving. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
So, okay, you can have artifact number one is a different problem. Artifact number two, like for instance, in the artifact, you give them a problem, and when the student able to submit the problem, okay, there are a lot of errors in the solution. So you ask the student to revise the solution and to revise the answer. So okay, the the revise is already the revise is what you call product or display. Now another portfolio is another problem. Okay, another problem. So this one can be even applied in mathematics. So a series of problem sets. You provide several sets of problem to our students. Now in the process portfolio, you notice that the students were not able to find the correct solution and the final answer. And then you give feedback, you comment on that. And then you ask the students to revise, their first work, okay? And then, okay, when students are able to get the correct answer, that becomes already what you call product. And then in the documentary portfolio, you ask both the papers of the students. So this is applicable even in mathematics. In mathematics. Sets of problems, you have several sets of problems. Uh-oh.
Thank you so much, Doc Popoy. So we will now have our last question. From Maria China Abonalia, her question is student portfolio considered a formative or summative assessment?
Now, it depends the type of portfolio. As I explained in the presentation, if it's a working portfolio, process portfolio, it is formative assessment. Okay, working portfolio, process portfolio is assessment as learning is assessment for learning. And both of them are formative assessment. Formative assessment is not graded. But when you ask a student to submit a product portfolio, a desktop portfolio, a documentary portfolio, an assessment portfolio, then that becomes a summative assessment. Okay, working portfolio is formative assessment that is not graded. What the students expect from us in the working portfolio is our formative comments for them to be able to improve, okay, and able to display, okay, their artifacts. Okay, however, when we ask the student only to include products, okay, or product portfolio, and then what we ask the student to submit a documentary portfolio, a product portfolio and a documentary portfolio are both summative assessments.
Thank you very much, Doc Popeye, for answering all those questions. So that ends our Q&A portion. At this point, allow us to award the Certificate of Appreciation to Doc Popoy. Ateneo ICTC presents the Certificate of Appreciation to Dr. Arnulfo Reganit for his invaluable time as a resource speaker for this afternoon's webinar session on student portfolio as an assessment tool in a flexible learning environment. Once again, thank you very much, Doc Popoy. Until next time po.
Welcome.
Thank you po.
Perhaps the participants might be interested to attend another webinar on process and assessment.
So, yeah.
Can we have another webinar on
Yes.
process-oriented assessment?
Thank you, Doc Popoy.
Bye.
So we would like to invite those who have attended this morning that we will have our 5th webinar session this afternoon. So we just want to clarify that there has been changes to the scheduled time. Instead of having it at 3 p.m., we will start at 1:30 p.m. Our topic for this afternoon would be about the effective online assessment using Google Forms. All you have to do is visit the ICTC YouTube channel or save the YouTube link that we will be posting at the comment section. So, mamaya po, instead yung 3 p.m. na nakaschedule dapat, yung original schedule, magiging 1:30 p.m. po siya. So, punta lang po kayo sa ICTC YouTube channel. Nandun na po yung, nakaprepare na po yung link. So, we hope to see you there po mamaya. We would like also to thank our viewers for staying with us throughout the session. So, your certificates are ready. Kindly accomplish the online evaluation flashed on screen. The online evaluation will be closing at 5 p.m. this afternoon. Yan po, makikita niyo po sa screen yung link for the online evaluation. Hanggang 5 p.m. lang po yung deadline namin. So, para makuha niyo po yung e-certificates niyo. So, yan po yung link. So, again, remind ko po yung 1:30 p.m. na webinar po mamaya. So, mga 1, abang na po kayo. Again, thank you everyone. Kindly like our Facebook page at Ateneo ICTC and subscribe to our YouTube channel kung hindi pa kayo nagsisubscribe. So, para ma-update kayo yung mga future webinars namin. So, next week, may webinars po ulit kami. So, abangan nyo po yun. So, see you again this afternoon for our next webinar. 1:30 p.m. po, wag niyo po kalimutan. So, happy lunchtime po. Thank you and bye for now.